Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well this Monday. I'm just really quickly going to go through the ELA lesson for the day. So if you've been confused on that, just go no further. Okay, so hold on, let me get the right tab open here. Okay, so this is your iReady lesson for the day, and what you're supposed to read is pages. You're supposed to read these two pages, and then we're going to do these two pages together, and that's your work for the day. So I'm just going to read it out loud to you, and I'm going to highlight things that I think are important. But what I'm going to do first is go down and look at my questions and just kind of see what it's going to be asking me. I see that it's going to ask me to see what is in common in this first question. It says which idea is in both of these passages. So I'm going to see what is in common between these two passages. And then my second one is choose one sentence from each that supports what is in common between the two. So I'm going to look and see and just kind of skim over these really quick. Satellites orbit the Earth every 12 hours. In rural areas, it's not always possible to build cell towers. Some cell phones have a global positioning system, and phones can use satellites to send and receive data. So I'm going to start to look over that and try to see. And as I'm looking here, and I'm looking at all these questions, this one says, based on the information found in both satellite and communication satellites, which idea is true? So I'm looking for details, I think, throughout this that connect in both passages. So we're going to try to find the topic that is shared by both. Okay. So satellite. A satellite is a small body or object that revolves around a larger object in space. The moon is the Earth's satellite, and all the planets are satellites of the sun. Moons and planets are called natural satellites. Artificial satellites are human-made objects that revolve around larger natural satellites. The first artificial satellite was Sputnik 1, an 185-pound capsule set into orbit by the Soviet Union in 1957. Since that time, many satellites have been sent into space. Today, there are hundreds of satellites circling Earth. They are used for research, weather study, navigation, and communication. I'm going to highlight that because I think that will end up being important. Among these is the largest, the International Space Station, where astronauts work and research in space. Okay, now we're moving on to communication satellites by Dirk Costa. How do communication satellites work? A cell phone uses cell towers to send and receive signals. However, in rural areas and over the oceans, it's not possible to erect cell phone towers. The solution is simple. We use a satellite phone, which can cover vast distances. So, how does it work? A satellite phone sends a signal to a satellite, and then the signal is sent down to a ground station. This station sends the call to the cell tower or landline. If someone wants to call a satellite phone, the reverse works too. The call from the landline or cell phone first goes to the ground station, then it travels up the satellite and then down to the satellite phone. Okay, so I'm going to make an annotation in my side here because this one is talking all about cell phones and satellites. I'm writing this to help me remember what each passage was about. And remember, when we're doing annotations, it can be anything that helps you to connect with the text. So I'm just going to summarize in a really short version what this 3 paragraphs was about. So I'm just going to write satellites, cell phones and satellites are used to help people communicate. All right, last one. How satellites track cell phones. You might have seen the television shows where the police located a missing person by locating his or her cell phone. Communication satellites make this possible if the phone has a global positioning system, GPS, chip inside the phone. Some 22,000 miles high above us, the United States operates 24 communication satellites that orbit Earth. The satellites circle Earth every 12 hours. They are positioned so that 5 satellites can be seen from any point on Earth at any time of day. These satellites transmit radio signals down to Earth. Each satellite measures the time it takes for a signal from a chip to reach the satellite, less than 1/10 of a second. Then it multiplies the time by how fast a radio wave moves, some 186,000 miles, or 300,000 kilometers a second. The result is the distance between this GPS chip and the satellite. So this paragraph is really telling us, I'm going to make a note, how GPS satellites work. I keep spelling the word satellite wrong. And so if I get a question about that, I can go back and look. To determine the accurate location of a cell phone, the GPS must use at least 3 satellites. 4 satellites make the data even more accurate. If all this sounds unbelievable, imagine this. The GPS can pinpoint a location within 35 feet. Okay. I'm going to highlight up here. You might have seen television, actually not this one. Communication satellites make this possible. Right here. So I want to highlight this because it's telling me that the satellites are helping us to locate a missing person and find them with GPS. And that's really the main idea of this whole thing. So, and then really the main idea is in the title. How do satellites track cell phones? Okay. So now let's go and start to answer some of these questions together. Now that we've read it all. Sweet. Okay. So this question has 2 parts. Which idea is in both communication satellites and how satellites track cell phones? So it's going to be in this one and this one. We know that both of these were talking about cell phone usage. Let's see. Satellites orbit the Earth every 12 hours. In rural areas, it's not always possible to build cell towers. I know that it talks about how, let's see. Where does it talk about traveling the Earth in 12 hours? I honestly don't even see that fact really anywhere in here. So I don't think that that is it at all. So I don't think it's going to be A. B, in rural areas, it's not always possible to build cell towers. I remember reading that. I think that was in this one. Let's see. Yeah, it was right here. However, in rural areas and over the oceans, it's not possible to build cell towers. But I know that it didn't actually talk about that one in this one. So I don't think that that is what's going to be in both of those passages. It was in one of them, but not in both. See, some cell phones have a global positioning system. Now, I know that that was used in this one because we highlighted it right here, the GPS, but it didn't talk about it in this one. So that one's not going to be our answer. So we can conclude that D is our correct answer. Phones can use satellites to send and receive data. So now let's look for a single quote in each of these that says that. So how does a satellite send data? Well, I can see right here where it says, so how does it work? A satellite phone sends a signal up to a satellite, and then the signal is sent down to a ground station. I'm going to use that quote. It's telling me how satellites are being used to send and receive data. It's telling me how it works. So I'm just going to write that into here. So it says a satellite phone sends a signal up to a satellite. And as I'm typing it, you could be writing it in your book. And the signal is sent down to a ground station. And then we can include this station sends the call to a cell phone or landline, because that's really how it's giving information, right? So I'm going to say the signal is then sent down to a ground station. And then the station sends the call to the cell phone or landline. So That is one quote that supports how satellites send and receive data. So now let's look at the other one. I already see right here that if you have lost your phone, that a GPS signal can be used with a communication satellite to help locate it. So let's see. Let's see which quote we want to use. Oh, here's that. We were looking for this earlier. The satellites circle Earth every 12 hours, but that was only in this article and not the other one. We can actually just use this quote right here. Right here. To determine an accurate location of a cell phone, the GPS must use at least 3 satellites. That's how. You could also, another great quote would use could be this one over here about how the satellites actually work. They send signals down to Earth. Each satellite measures the time for a signal from a chip to reach the satellite. Whichever one you want to put is totally okay, but you just need a quote that's talking about how do satellites send and receive data. So I think actually this one might be better for us. So let's use the one that I highlighted in green here. But either of these would honestly be okay. So the satellites transmit radio signals down to Earth. I'm going to type that right here. And you obviously would finish writing that quote in that box. All right, let's keep going. Based on the information found in both satellite and communication satellites, which idea is true? So now we're looking at this one and this one, okay? It says, A, the first satellite was put into orbit around Earth in 1957. B, a cell phone relies on cell towers. C, there are special satellites that are used for communication. Or D, satellite phones allow communication over long distances. Okay. So, I know this one is talking about cell phones, but let's look here. Today, there are hundreds of satellites circling Earth. They are used for research, weather study, navigation, and communication. Ding, ding, ding. I think right here it's telling us that cell phones or satellites are used for communication. I really don't see much specifically about cell phones, so I'm going to need to find the answer choice that doesn't specifically just talk about cell phones. And I think right here is going to be our answer because it says the first satellite was put into orbit around 1957. That one is in this article, yes, but it doesn't even talk about 1957 at all in this article, so I know that that one's not true. Let's see. B, so a cell phone relies on cell towers. In the first one, it doesn't even talk about cell phones at all. C, there are special satellites that are used for communication. I know that here it's talking about communication satellites. You see this word communication. So this one, it talks about how they're used for communication. And also in this one, if you look right here, this word communication, I'll circle it for you. So in both passages, it talked about that. So I'm going to guess that that is my correct answer. So I'm going to guess C. And then satellite phones allow communication over long distances. I think C is our best answer there. Okay, number 3. Last one. Satellites help us to communicate with each other. Choose one detail from satellite and one detail from how satellites work or attract cell phones to best support this idea. Okay, so we need to find out 2 quotes that help us to see how satellites help us to communicate with one another. Okay. Let's look. So A, an object that revolves around a larger object. Let's go look at that quote. A satellite is a small body or object that revolves around a larger object in space. Does that tell us how it helps us communicate? No. So I'm going to give that one a big nah. I'm going to cross this one out. That is not it. Okay. Used for research, weather, study, navigation, and communication. Let's see. Let's read that whole quote for us. Okay. Today, there are hundreds of satellites circling Earth. They are used for research, weather, study, navigation, and communication. Does that one talk about how it helps us